I know the title of the video already seemed very ominous and ridiculous considering the book isn't out yet, but the reason why I titled it as Why I Already Hate R.F. Kuang's KATABASIS even before it's released is because I read the title and then I read the blurb and immediately got pissed off. Let me explain. When I first saw the title of her book, I was intrigued because I knew what KATABASIS was because I read a lot for no apparent reason. And the word KATABASIS comes from the Greek word of kata, means down, and baino, means go. So KATABASIS means going down or going under, which is to say that descent into the underworld or Hades. We see many instances of KATABASIS in the Greek myth. The most famous would be Orpheus going into the underworld to rescue his wife Eurydice. We have Psyche who travels to the underworld as a part of Aphrodite's task to retrieve Persephone's beauty cream. We also have Heracles who goes to Hades to retrieve Cerberus. There's also a strange myth of Theseus and I cannot remember if it's his friend or cousin Pirithous. They go down to Hades to kidnap Persephone. I'm not certain why they thought this was a good idea, but they get welcomed for a feast, and when they sit down on the chairs, they find themselves stuck in it. They cannot leave. They are trapped. And the only reason they escape is because Heracles happens to come down to Hades at that time to retrieve Cerberus. And so he happens to see Theseus and Pirithous there, and he's the one who frees them from being stuck in the chair, which is really funny. There is also KATABASIS in the Odyssey, but I would argue that what happens in the Odyssey is not necessarily a KATABASIS, because a KATABASIS is referred to as a physical journey into the underworld, as in the characters going into Hades. But Odysseus, on the other hand, he doesn't go into the underworld. He merely stands on the edge of the realm to speak with Tiresias, and so he's simply communicating with the dead and is not necessarily undertaking KATABASIS. So, from all that I've explained about KATABASIS, you would think I am not wrong in assuming when I saw the title on R.F. Kuang's newest book, I thought, this is going to be a story about a character who goes to the underworld to probably save someone they love or tasked with the impossible to go into Hades, come out victorious in the end. But imagine my surprise when I read the blurb. Two academic rivals from Cambridge must travel to hell to rescue the soul of their advisor. Getting there was easy, surviving it and each other is another thing entirely. 2025's most unexpected love story is going to be Hell in the new novel by Sunday Times #1 bestseller R.F. Kuang. On first read or first listening, you would think, there's certainly nothing wrong with the blurb, but there is one word in there that pissed me off, which is the word hell. Let me explain. Greek 101. So the Greeks consider the world to be split into 3 realms. The sky, Oranos, is where Olympus is located with the gods and those who are offered mortality. And we have Gaia, the earth, where mortals live. And lastly, the underworld, also known as Hades, where the dead are. Now, let's make a clear distinction that Hades is not hell. Hell is a Christian image of the afterlife of those who have, I would quote, sinned. To the Greeks, however, Hades was simply a realm. It's a realm where the dead go. They get to the boat with Charon in it and they cross the river Styx to the many rivers of Hades. And it's said that those who are blessed are allowed to go to the Isle of Blessed, which is Elysian, and those who drink from the river Lethe, also known as the river of forgetfulness, they forget the life they've lived and are said to be reincarnated or reborn. That's why the Mysteries is said to warn the dead to not drink from the river Lethe, to be liberated from the cycle of rebirth. Now, the closest thing we even get to hell is Tartarus, and Tartarus is not hell. Tartarus is a primordial being who was born alongside Gaia, Erebus, Nyx, all the primordial being. And Tartarus is said to be far, far below Hades. Some of his famous inhabitants are the Titans, who are imprisoned there by Zeus after the Titanomachy. And and the mortals who pissed off the gods, like Sisyphus, Tantalus, Ixion, to name some. And so you see, Tartarus is not a place where people go to be punished. They are put there because they have pissed off the Olympian gods, to be specific, to some degree. And what Rebecca seems to be saying here is that the Greek underworld and hell are the same thing. Because if you have the title of your novel called KATABASIS, I would assume you are telling a novel in the Greek understanding of KATABASIS, or the realm of the underworld. But then your blurb mentions hell, which is a very Christian image. So which is it, Rebecca? Are we talking about hell in the Christian allegory hell, or are we talking about Hades, as in the KATABASIS that these Greek mythic characters take into the realm of Hades? It's the thing I've noticed from Rebecca is that she seems to want everything to go her way, and I've noticed this in Babel too, where it's a historical fantasy, and the premise of Babel in itself is primarily about languages and linguistics and words lost in translation. But there's also this weird idea of silver magic that does not make sense, because somehow silver magic gets activated by those words that is lost in translation. But how exactly does the silver know what is being commanded to do from that specific word, or the word says lost in translation? How does silver know what they need, what those protectioners are trying to tell? It's silver in itself sentient? Like, if she had just said that the power of magic comes from understanding the words lost in translation, and what is lost is what gives them power, and instead that could have been a cool magic system in itself. It could have just been confined to the languages and linguistics, which was what Rebecca seems to be focusing on. There was no need for the silver at all. And I understand the reason why silver was even introduced in this novel as a collateral for the colonialism that happens worldwide. I mean, it's not necessary for colonialism to happen just for silver. It could be regardless for anything, land, resource, anything. But the language and the words that are lost in translation could just be what gives them the power in itself. That what is lost is what allows the magic to be performed. The words lost in translation is what allows the practitioners to access that magic. And the only way to access it is through this archaic myth. And it's very academic as well. You need to learn the etymology and stuff, which could really work. But Rebecca seems to want everything to go her way. You know, if she had just said that this is just a silly little love story that has a kind of KATABASIS, or this love story is a KATABASIS inspired myth, can understand what the narrative theme she's trying to say. That either physically or metaphorically, this character is undertaking a task at hand to retrieve something precious to them. I can understand what she's trying to say. And then the blurb talks about hell, and so I'm thinking, which is it? Which is she trying to depict? Because the title could have been easily written as To Hell with Love, or From Hell to Back, or To Hell with You. Like, literally any other title other than KATABASIS works with the blurb. Because I feel as if she only put that word KATABASIS as the title because it sounded cool, or because Rebecca herself has admitted in the past that she's really bad at coming up with novel names. Yellowface was originally called As You Do or As You Like It, or either one of it, before her agent or editor or someone suggested Yellowface, and then that became the title. Even Babel said to her by her fiance, and because she didn't want to compromise on the other titles, Babel became Babel and Arcana History, or The Necessity of Violence. That's what I don't understand. If she was setting her entire story in hell, why call her novel KATABASIS? It doesn't make sense. If she just wanted the idea of an underworld from Greek, from Christian, and just say, you know, this is my own personal hell, this is what it looks like, or even perhaps stick to one specific hell. And the whole story is about these two magicians, so it could be it's a specific realm that is only accessed by this specific group of people, and it can be part of their law, their culture. Work in so many ways. Rebecca can make it work in so many ways, but apparently world building seems to be too much effort and she would rather just do the bare minimum. That was really what at first pissed me off about the title and the blurb. And then I found out there was actually a bonus chapter in the newest editions of Yellowface. I read it and it proved to piss me off even more. So, okay, I will read the bonus chapter and explain in detail what really annoyed me about it, what I found annoying, and we'll see. Okay, so this is the bonus chapter of KATABASIS. Cambridge, Michaelmas term, October. The wind bit, the sun hit, and on the first day of class, when she ought to have been lecturing undergraduates about the dangers of using temporary mind-body severance spells to revise without pee breaks, Alice Law set out to rescue her advisor's soul from the 8 courts of hell. Okay, she has established there is a hell, there is also 8 courts of hell, probably a reference or a nod towards the 9 circles of hell that Dante wrote in his magnum opus, the Divine Comedy. The circles of hell are described in the first book, Inferno, and strange thing I keep seeing how everyone were putting out this reading list in anticipation of KATABASIS so they can catch all the Easter egg reference and all the name drops, I would say, in the novel. And Dante's Inferno is one of it. But you cannot just read Inferno in isolation to the Divine Comedy. You have to take all 3 of Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise to understand what Dante was trying to talk about. We'll circle back to Dante in a moment. He's mentioned later on in the book. For now, let's carry on. It was a terrible and gruesome accident that killed Professor Declan Grimes, and from a certain point of view, it was her fault. And so for reasons of both moral obligation and self-interest, for without Professor Grimes, she had no committee chair, and without a committee chair, she could not defend her dissertation, graduate, or apply successfully for a tenure-track job in analytical magic. Alice found it necessary to beg for his life, back from the King Yama the Merciful, ruler of the underworld. Oh boy. Anyone is not familiar with the name, King Yama or Yamraj is the Vedic ruler of Yamaloka. Loka here just translate to realm, so Yama's realm. And another name for Yama's realm is Naraka. I would say translates to hell. Okay, we have to get into a bit of a Vedic teachings and understanding. So in Hindu philosophy or Vedic philosophy, we believe the soul acquires certain depths in its life. There are good depths and bad debts, and those debts sort of function like a bank account. So how much you acquire as the good one and the bad ones, and when you die you are brought to Yamaloka, and Yamraj has his minister Chitragupta, who has the names of everyone who has died, that lists all the deeds balanced on those accounts of have acquired while on earth. And depending on which deed outweighs the other, if your good deed outweighs the bad, you are sent to Swarga to experience pleasures beyond your wildest imagination. If your bad deed outweigh your good ones, you are sent to Naraka to be punished. And it is said that this part of the afterlife is simply a temporary retreat that the soul visits before it is reborn, because for someone to truly attain moksha or enlightenment, you have to have both of these accounts completely depleted, both good deeds and bad deeds, and it's only then you are granted moksha. And I digress. Back to this, you can already see why I have a problem with it, and it's only been 2 paragraphs. She says the title is KATABASIS, referring to the Greek term, so you'd assume the story is a Greek narrative and structure. But then you have courts of hell and the name Yamraj in here. The thing I want to know now is, which are we supposed to be on the lookout for, Rebecca? Is it the Greek underworld, the Christian hell, or the Vedic Yamaloka? Which is it? And when she says here King Yama the Merciful is not the correct term for him. The more accurate term for Yamraj would be the righteous one, because that's Yamraj has another name called Dharmaraja, and Dharma has no exact translation, Babel reference, if anyone got that, but the closest word is righteousness. So his name is supposed to be King Yama the Righteous, not King Yama the Merciful. Yamaraj is not merciful, he's righteous. That's what makes him the ruler of Yamaloka. So I'm already I don't know. Okay, but we'll move on. We cannot just take up a whole paragraph. Okay, let's continue. This was no small undertaking. Over the past month and change, she had become self-taught in Tartarology, which was not one of her subfields to begin with. It was not anyone's subfield, as Tartarologists rarely survived to publish their work. Since Professor Grimes' demise, she had spent her every waking moment reading all the monographs, papers, notes, and correspondence she could find that discussed the journey to hell and back. At least a dozen scholars had made this trip and lived to credibly tell the tale, but very few of them did so within the past century. All existing sources on how to get there and survive were unreliable to different degrees and devilishly tricky to translate besides. Dante's accounts were so full of Christian allegory and spiteful portraits that the reportage got lost within. T.S. Eliot's work contained some of the more recent and detailed landscape description on record, but the wasteland was so self-referential and convoluted that its status as a sojourner's account was under serious dispute. Okay, that's why I have a problem with this sort of name drops and accounting, because the specific texts that she's referring to are not to be lumped together under one umbrella. If she had just said, these are some scholars' review of what it said here and what is said there, Dante did not write Inferno to show the world his imaginative world building of hell. He wrote the Divine Comedy as a way a person to attain liberation for the soul, or a way for them to reach God. He wrote Inferno to show those who were doing the misdeeds that they were, that this is what you're going to be stuck in if you continue your ways. And that's the thing, people always take Inferno in isolation without looking at it as one part of a whole picture. You have to understand purgatory and paradise as well. He talks about this journey as a way of purifying oneself and purifying the soul. It's his way of showing you are able to do this as well if you want to attain the heavenly spheres, to which he says where the Heavenly Father resides. People always take his account of Inferno as this, oh my god, is a great world building of hell, which I won't lie, it's a great world building of hell, because no one has seen such a complete description he gives within each circles of hell and why those people are there. I'm not familiar with T.S. Eliot's work of the Wasteland. I'll probably go read that. We'll continue the chapter. Orpheus' notes, already in archaic Greek, were largely in stretch like the rest of him, and Aeneas, well, that was all just Roman propaganda. Wow. See, that's what I'm trying to explain, that KATABASIS in itself is not the whole journey. It's one part of the character's journey or the hero's journey that they undertake. And it's sometimes even the last resort. In case of Odysseus, he communicated with Tiresias because he was at wit's end. He was lost. He could not find any way for him to get back to Ithaca without Poseidon diverting his way. He was at wit's end. He didn't know what else to do, and communing with the dead was the last resort he had. And even Orpheus and Psyche's journey to the underworld was the last part of her task before she could attain Eros' love. And even Orpheus, he could not move on without Eurydice. And that's also very prevalent in, I would say, the hero's journey or the sojourn into the underworld, is that is part of the final hurdle, the part that you can see that in the face and you can not feel fear for it, but a silent acceptance. That's what the whole point of KATABASIS is coming to terms with one's own mortality. It's not that these characters are able to go down to the underworld as a show of bravery or show of valor or any sort of thing. It's these characters' understanding of their own immortality that they come to understand. Orpheus learns that everyone will return to Hades one day. He cannot be with Eurydice in the mortal realm no matter how much he wished. And Psyche, as a final metamorphosis to attaining Eros' love, she has to die to herself to attain his love. Dionysus is the only god who has gone into the underworld to retrieve the soul of his mother, Semele, and to restore her to Olympus as a goddess. It also personifies Dionysus as this god reborn in a way, because he, just like Zeus, who later on come to reclaim his place as the ruler of the realm from his father Kronos, Dionysus comes to spread his teachings and rites to the Hellenistic people, and proving that he has become one of the Olympians. He has established his right and his dominions in the Greek culture. That's what I attribute KATABASIS to, that it's this profound journey one undertakes that transform them, but they're motivated by something noble. Orpheus and Psyche, even Heracles to a point, are motivated by love. Orpheus' love for his dead wife, Psyche's love for Eros, who is love himself, Heracles' love for the family he killed. We understand their motives. There is a nobleness, genuine heart in what they're pursuing. But when I read about Alice Law here, it's just, I don't understand what is compelling her to go and rescue this professor from hell, and she just wants a job recommendation letter. But is there no other professors that can give her that job recommendation letter? Is there no other way she can finish a dissertation without him? Like, it does not make sense, or it's not a compelling reason for her to go down to rescue this one professor who, by all accounts, she later says that she clearly hates. Like, everyone clearly hates, so I don't see the motive behind it. But okay, let's read the other part. Alice could have spent decades poring through the archives, but her funding clock could not wait. Fifth-year review awaited at the end of the term, and without a living and breathing advisor, the best Alice could hope for was an extension of funding sufficient to last until she transferred elsewhere and found somewhere new to work with. I mean, that seems like a far more reasonable thing to do, I would assume, because she's not even in actual remorse. Yes, she says that she has a moral obligation to bring him back, but is that the only obligation she has? She doesn't even feel remorse that she has caused his death and that somehow she's doing penance for anything. She's doing it for the job recommendation, which does not feel compelling at all. Yeah, I cannot see any reason why anyone would do such a thing. The professor is not even someone who she regards as in a father figure, or someone who she deeply cares about to do something about it. This is just a guy who she just wants a recommendation letter for. Is it that hard to get a recommendation letter from anyone else? She checked and double-checked her chalk inscription. She always left the closing of the circle to the end, absolutely sure that uttering and thereby activating the pentagram wouldn't kill her. Magic demanded precision. One always had to be sure. She stared at the neat white lines until they no longer made sense to her. It was, she concluded, as good as he was ever gonna be. Human minds were fallible, but hers less so. And that was the only thing she could trust. And that's the thing, she doesn't say what is so special about Cambridge that she has to be that specific university, that specific college, that specific professor. Okay, at first I didn't understand why she was specifically using pentagram, because thought about the pentagram was as in the five-sided polygon, the pentagram, not the star pentagram. I mean, specific shapes have their connotation. The circle is the logos, triangle represents the trinity, the three states of person, body, mind, soul. You have the alchemical triad, salt, mercury, sulfur. A square that represents the four elements or the four states of being. And so I was like, okay, it makes the association with the witchcraft practice, and there's a magician, and so, which also begs the question now, are we supposed to say that all of this is what she's trying to lump in together? We have the Greek world, the Christian hell, the Vedic lord of the underworld, and witchcraft into one? I do not see the correlation in any of this. And then I did more reading, and it finally clicked for me that what Rebecca here is referring to is not the pentagram but the pentacle, because she describes in the paragraph about closing the circle, and this is a very specific symbol of the pentacle, which is very prevalent in neo-pagan culture. But I don't understand why she's referring it to as a pentagram when she could just say it's a pentacle, because maybe saying it as a pentacle is going to derive it from what she's trying to say, which is already derivative, since she does not know what sort of underworld or hell she's describing or trying to go for here. But that's the thing. If she had just made her title as KATABASIS, it can still be worked as an underworld, and she can still sort of work its way into witchcraft itself, because the Greeks have Hecate, and Hecate is known as the goddess of witchcraft. Kirky, who is said to have magical abilities as well, and she is known from the Odyssey. She traps Odysseus and his men on her island for 12 years before she allows them to leave. And we have Medea, who also the niece of Kirky, and she is said to have magical abilities as well. And so there is ways Rebecca can play with these elements, make this a cohesive storyline, and yet she is insistent on trying to stuff it in with so much of these references to make sound smart, but it just makes it all just very unappetizing, I would say. And that's also the problem, that she wants this to be Cambridge as in actual Cambridge, not just Cambridge as in a university that is running in parallel with the actual Cambridge, like Philip Pullman's His Dark Material. Oxford that Lyra grows up in is a parallel Oxford to the one that they live in. Or Rebecca could have just said, there is a department, a secret department, not even a secret department, is a department that is close to public, that not a lot of people know, but it is a department where they study scientific theories or magic, and that department recruits the most highly competitive students, and it can be the department that is not known to a lot of people, and the people enrolled there are not seen in the other part of Cambridge enrollment. And so you could still work this out. It could still be this whole department can also be a part of a secret society. Freemasons, the Golden Order, all these things is part of this world of theme. And I don't know why Rebecca refused to even consider to do something with this. Even if it's not a secret society within academia, it could be something else compelling. But yet she's insistent on it having to be Cambridge. It has to be known in the real world. Everybody just has basic knowledge that people are studying magic in the departments, and nobody gives any shit about it. It's the same thing that she does with Babel. It's Oxford, the Tower of Babel, with silver magic, and nothing changes. As if Rebecca, that one line alone changes everything, regardless if it's our Oxford or not. Like when you introduce a variable into a scenario, regardless, that immediately changes the outcome. It's science experiment 101. You have your hypothesis and you have your fixed variable. The moment you introduced a changed variable, the outcome will significantly change as well. Rebecca, you should know this. You're writing this book as a scientific magic. You should know this. I continue to digress, so let's move on. She reached for her chalk. One smooth stroke and the pentagram was finished. Okay, I don't understand why they have to use chalk. Is there a specific property in chalk that allows them to do magic? Why specifically chalks? What is in chalk that allows magic to be channeled and not any other compound like salt or blood or even mercury? Actual conductive elements that's known for its conductivity. So why specifically chalk? Like, what's so special about chalk that it allows them to do magic? I want to have it explained to me. If I want my suspension of belief for this story, she should just have said that this is a university, they study magic. I can suspend my belief for that, but she insists on it being Cambridge and a department, and they study analytical magic and they use chalks. And I want to know why. Why are they using chalks? She took a deep breath and stepped inside. There was of course a price. No one travelled to hell unscathed, but she'd resolved at the outset to pay it, for it seemed so trivial in the span of things. She only hoped it wouldn't hurt. "What are you doing?" She knew that voice. She knew before she turned around who she would find at the door. Peter Murdoch, coat unbuttoned, shirt untucked, papers flapping from his satchel, threatening to tear away in the wind. For years, Alice had resented how Peter, who every day presented himself like he'd barely scooped himself out of bed, had still managed to become the darling of the department. Though this was no surprise. Academia respected discipline, but even more it adored genius that didn't have to try. Peter Murdoch and his bird's nest hair looked like he'd never tried anything in his life. He was simply born brilliant, all the knowledge of centuries past poured without spillage into his brain. Alice looked at him. God, what a self-righteous bitch she is. I mean, that poor guy. He hardly done anything, and she's like, I hate him because he hardly has to put any effort into what he does. What? That's the thing I have noticed with so much of the trend of the books coming out, where it is described as enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers, and because that trope is already instilled, you have your characters just hate one another for no apparent reason. This poor guy, he's just there. Like, there's nothing that he's personally done to offend her, and she's like, she just resented because he's him. There's a text my friend sent once I showed her this bonus chapter, and she read this part and she says, I quote, "So Alice hates Peter because he's a genius and she has to put in effort, dot dot, why the hatred? There's no substance," end quote. Which I agree. Like, I'll continue and you'll see what I mean. "Leave me alone," she said. Peter trudged in and stepped into a circle, which was very rude. "One should always ask before entering another magician's pentagram. I know what you're planning. Two's basic transportive pentagram with Satya's modifications," he said, which impressed Alice since it only glanced briefly at the ground and from a distance beside Ramanujam's summonation with implication for Casimir's effect to establish a psychic link to the target. 8 bars for 8 chords. A grin split his face. "Alice Law, you naughty girl. You're trying to go to hell." "Well, if you know that much," Alice snipped, "you know there's only room for one of us." Peter knelt, pushed his glasses up his nose, and with his own stick of chalk, quickly etched some alterations into the pentagram. This was also very rude. One should always ask before interfering with another scholar's work, but standards of etiquette did not seem to apply to Peter Murdoch. Peter moved through life with a kind of oblivious absent-mindedness that again was excused only by his genius. Alice had witnessed Peter spill chocolate syrup all over the Master of College's robe at a high table with no more rebuke than a shoulder clap and a laugh. She had herself once spent all of dinner in the bathroom hyperventilating through her fingers because she'd knocked a bread basket onto the floor. And that is his fault. How? Like, you clearly see she describes him as he's done nothing to personally offend her except just exist in the same space as she does. She finds it in herself to hate him because she cannot find any fault in him, because she herself finds herself lacking. This is inferiority complex. She has inferiority complex. That's what this is. Oh my god. This is not a rivals to lovers. This is someone with an inferiority complex projecting on a person who she believes gets through life easily, which might not even be true. And that's the thing, the way she describes him and her feelings of hatred has no correlation. There was nothing he had done personally to her to warrant such a strong hatred, except that he's nice and is a genius. Also, I recognize all those mathematicians. Like I said, I read a lot for no apparent reason, so of course I recognize all these mathematicians' name, which sounds completely pretentious to the whole thing if I'm being honest. Like, you could just say it's this equation. If we do this stuff and this stuff, why add in these names as a sort of way to sound cool or sound smart without the implication of what it actually means or why they're using that names except to just sound cool. 1 becomes 2. Peter waggled his fingers. Abracadabra. Now there's room. Alice double-checked his inscription and realized to her dismay that his work was perfect. She would have preferred he made an error that left him limbless, and she would have truly preferred that he did not then declare, "I'm coming with you." "No, you aren't." For the people in Cambridge Department of Analytical Magic, Peter Murdoch was the last person with whom she wanted to sojourn through the underworld. Perfect, brilliant, infuriating Peter, who won the department's top prize at every milestone. Best first-year paper, best second-year paper, Dean's medals in logic and mathematics, which were subfield to be fair until she has come to Cambridge and she was not losing, but this is what I'm saying. His character clearly has inferiority complex. That's the thing, people describe all of this as like rivals to lover. They're not even, I don't even know if they're on the same par. She just has an inferiority complex to assume that's about it. Peter was one of those academics descended from a family of academics, a magician born to a physicist and a biologist, which meant he'd been steeped in the extracurricular education and social etiquette necessary to navigate this world since before he could walk. Peter already had every good thing in the world. He did not need Professor Grimm's letter to get a job. Girl, are you for real? Like, how is it his fault he's born to a pair of academics? How is it his fault he's grown up with all of this and you aren't? She's basically just jealous of all of this. How is it any of this is his fault? If he has been gloating about it, had been using that influence to get what he wants, there's a righteousness to Alice's hatred towards him. But this girl is just jealous and she's masking it as hatred, which is wow. I mean, also the line, "a magician born to a physicist and a biologist," that's the thing. It's not even explained in the book. How is magic inherited in this universe? Is it nature or nurture? Is it genetic or something learned? Are Peter's parents also magicians in addition to being a biologist and a physicist? Like, how does this work? How do they even know that magic exists? How do they even discover it? Like, she's not explained anything at all. Okay, let's continue. Worst of all was how Peter was so unfailingly nice, always stumbling around with that polite and innocent smile on his face, always offering to help others puzzle through their research hiccup, always asking his lab mates how their weekends had been when he knew very well they'd spend it sobbing over proofs that he could have done in his sleep. Peter never crowed or condescended, he was just guilelessly better than, and that made everyone feel so much worse. Literally, how is that his fault? How is it you holding it against him because he's nice and he helps people? Oh my god. No, Alice wanted to solve this problem herself. She did not want Peter Murdoch yapping over her shoulder the entire time, nitpicking her pentagrams because he was just trying to be helpful. And should she return with Professor Grimes' soul safely in tow, she especially did not want Peter sharing the credit. Oh boy. Hal's lonely, said Peter. You want company? Hell is other people, I've heard. Very funny. I would really hate it for this book to show that Peter had always had a crush on Alice, because I don't know, these tropes about the guys always falling for the girls and the girls having this immense hatred for them for no apparent reason except that they're being nice. Come on, you'll need help carrying supplies at least. Alice had stashed in her bag a brand new petrol flask, an enchanted water bottle that wouldn't run out for weeks, and a lembas bread. Is this lembas bread from the Lord of the Rings? Can she do that? Can she actually just take words from other works and just put it there? I mean, is that not a copyrighted? I mean, is lembas bread public known word? And lembas bread, stale cardboardy nutrition strips popular among graduate students because they took less than 30 seconds to eat and kept one sated for hours. There's nothing enchanted about lembas bread. They were just the extracted proteins of tons of peanuts and an ungodly percentage of sugar. She had flashlights, iodine, matchsticks, rope, bandages, and a hypothermia blanket. She had a new sparkling pack of Berkeley's chalk and every reliable map of hell she could find in the university library, carefully reproduced in a laminated binder. They all claimed different apologies. She figured she would get up somewhere high and choose a map when she arrived. Like I said, she has no idea of what hell looks like because Rebecca doesn't, because she has clumped every possible culture within this for no apparent reason, and they don't know how she's even going to get through. How does she know where she's going to find the professor's soul? Like, is there a manual instruction that said that he's in a specific place from where he died? Like, how does she even know he's in hell? And that's a whole other question, so I'll come to the end when I get there, but for now, she had a switchblade and 2 sharp hunting knives, and she had a volume of Proust in case at night she ever got bored. To be honest, she had never gotten around to trying Proust, though Cambridge had made her the kind of person who wanted to have read Proust, and she figured hell was a good place to start. I'm all set, and you'll need help puzzling through the chords, Peter said. Hell's very metaphysically tricky, you know. Anscombe claims the constant spiritual reorientation alone. Alice rolled her eye. Please don't insinuate I'm not clever enough to go to hell. God, I really hate it. She's completely condescending. Because part of the inferiority complex that these characters have is that they immediately jump to the kind of snappy response. Like, they cannot just deal with stuff because they know they're smart. They have to prove themselves every time to say, oh, you think I'm not smart enough? You think I'm not brave enough? I'm going to prove that. I'm going to prove this. I'm like, if you know you're smart, there's no need to prove to anyone else. The only person who needs to do this is people with inferiority complex, which she clearly has. Okay, puzzling through hell. So what this is now insinuating is that hell is less of a concept where people go to be punished, but more of a puzzling realm. You know, Rebecca could have named this as literally anything. Like, literally anything other than hell. It can be Wonderland, it can be Underworld, it literally can be anything other than hell. I did not know why she insists on naming it hell and doing everything in her power to describe it as not hell. You know what could have been cooler about this story? The space that she's describing as hell could have just been an interdimensional space, a kind of liminal space, and in between space. There was an interview I saw. Someone recorded her during the Manchester Literature Festival where she was talking about KATABASIS, and she said while she was writing KATABASIS, she was teaching a class on Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland, and she was talking about how she was inspired by this illogical world in Alice in Wonderland and how she was inspired to do the same. And you could have just done that. You could have literally just done that as an interdimensional space, or just space that intersects with our own, or it could have been anything other than hell, and yet she insists on it being hell, but she's doing all she can to describe it as not being hell. It could have just been a confusing realm. It could have just been a kind of liminal space where logic doesn't work, because I can see that's what she's clearly working towards. She told that the hell that even the cover of the novel is a Penrose test. A Penrose test is a test that there's no end to this test. You still end up in the one place. It's a puzzle. I can clearly see what she's trying to do, and she could have just done that instead of emphasizing it or insisting that it is hell. Let's just continue. Do you have a copy of Clary? Of course. Alice wouldn't forget Clary's templates. She didn't forget anything. Have you cross-checked all 12 authoritative versions of Orpheus' journey? Of course I did. Orpheus is the obvious place to stop. I don't know, the whole thing sounds pretentious to me. I don't know. For someone who clearly hates Peter Murdoch, she very willing to just let him come along. I mean, if I hated someone, I clearly despise this person, regardless if they're nice or not, they try and come and help me, I will fuck them over. I will fight them, because this has nothing to do with that person. This is my own stuff, and if this is someone I clearly hated, I would not allow them to even help. If I was Alice and Peter came and added another equation to allow himself to go to hell with her, I would have just literally destroyed that whole pentagram and just walked off. I mean, I don't know what they're supposed to be doing, but clearly something. Do you know how to cross Leith? And we're back to Leith now, again. Do you know how to tame Kerberos? Okay, I'll give her that. Kerberos was in Greek Underworld and he was in Dante. But he's certainly not in Alice in Wonderland or in Yamaloka. Alice stumbled. She knew this was a possible obstruction. She'd seen the threat of Kerberos mentioned in a letter from Dante to Bernardo Canacchio. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Only she hadn't seen it referenced in any other material she found, and the one book that might have contained a clue, Bandix, Dante and the Literal Inferno, was already missing from the stacks. In fact, quite a few books she needed had kept disappearing from the library these past few months, often checked out at very morning she'd gone in. Every translation of the Aeneid or the medieval scholarship Lazarus. I'm not really sure which Lazarus she's talking about here, but it was like some infuriating ghosts hunted the stacks, anticipating her project's every turn. Realization dawned. I don't know how she jumped to this conclusion that he's the one who's been taking the book. There's literally every other scholars in that university who could have taken these books. I've been researching the same thing, said Peter. We're too far into this degrees, Alice. No one else could evaluate our dissertation. No one else is clever enough, and there's still so much he hasn't taught us. We have to bring him back, and 2 minds are better than one here. Alice had to laugh. All this time, every empty slot on the shelves, every missing puzzle piece, Peter held them all. Tell me how to tame Kerberos then. Nice try, Law. She supposed she could demand the relevant books. Peter was annoying, but he didn't hoard resources and figure it all out on her own. But there simply wasn't time. Fine, she said. I hope you brought your own chalk. 2 new packs of Shropleys, he said happily. Yes, she recalled he prepared Shropleys. Evidence of bad character. At least this meant she wouldn't have to share. Oh, but she is such a pain in the ass. She arranged the bag next to her feet, checking that none of the straps lay outside the pentagram. Then all that's left is the incantation. Are you ready? Hold on, said Peter. You know the price, right? Of course Alice knew. This was why scholars rarely ever went to hell. It wasn't like getting there was so very hard. You only had to dig up all the right proofs and spend several sleepless days mastering them all until you could recite them from memory without mistake. That a trip down below rarely justified the price. Half my remaining lifespan, she said. Entering hell meant crashing through borders between worlds, and this demanded a kind of energy that mere sticks of chalk could not contain. 30 years or so gone. Okay. Entering hell meant crashing through borders between worlds. So is it said there are other worlds? There are other liminal spaces between the realm? Is hell the only realm that's beside Earth? Okay, I don't understand why they have to pay their remaining lifespan as payment or fee to enter hell. I do not understand why that is a fee that is being paid, because if you mention that breaking through other realms requires a high dense energy, your remaining lifespan does not count into quantifiable energy, because you are talking you need specific amount of energy to crash through in between borders and realms to reach hell, but you're saying the fee is remaining lifespan, which is unquantifiable matter. I mean, lifespan itself is just a human concept. There's no such thing as a human lifespan that comes into quantifiable energy. It makes no sense. Like, what's the equivalent exchange? I don't understand how the remaining life force becomes the equivalent exchange to quantifiable energy that is required to crash through the borders and land in hell. Like, I do not understand that. I would presume like if anyone wants to go into hell, that's the fee to pay, the remaining lifespan. So what's the maximum cap for someone to enter hell? What if someone only has like 40 years to live and their remaining lifespan is like 20? Like, is that enough to go into hell? And also, how is Alice certain that her remaining lifespan is 30 years or so? What is the calculation that she's made that gives her the absolute certainty of the answer that she will live to cross past 60? What even brought her to this conclusion? Do they all magically know their lifespan? Is that a common knowledge? Is that something that is completely attainable without any changed variable playing into that equation as inevitability? What if she was to die next week or even not cross 30? Like, is the inevitable not a factor in this calculation? People's lifespan are not just one integral arithmetic calculation. Every day is a constant changing variable to a person's lifespan. The economy, other people, grief, depression, love. There's so many variables that either shortens or extends someone's lifespan. How is she so certain that she has life to live till 60? People who think they will live to see past 70 die before they even reach midlife, and people who think they will never reach to see their adulthood in 20s live till 90 or so. How is she entirely certain that she is not going to kill herself before she crosses 30, or if she even dies by accident? Like, what is determining her lifespan? What is this fixed variable that she has, that she's certain that she's going to live past 60? What is this calculation, Rebecca? Okay. But she had hardly struggled with the choice. Would she rather graduate, produce brilliant research, and go out in a blaze of glory, or would she rather live out her natural lifespan, grey-haired, doddering, fading into irrelevance, consumed with regret? Had not Achilles chosen to die in battle? Okay, this is a very common misconception. Achilles in no any possible way chose to die in battle. If anyone is familiar with Achilles' story, we know his mother, Thetis, she gets a prophecy, or she hears a prophecy, that her son Achilles has two fates planned out for him, between home and glory. If he chooses home, he would live a long and unremarkable life and die as an ordinary man. But if he chooses glory, he will have an incredibly short life, but he will be remembered by everyone. Thetis does not want her son to die a short life, regardless of the glory he attains, and so she takes him from Chiron and hides him in Skyros, and that is where he's disguised as a girl, and that's where Achilles meets Didymia and bears him the son Neoptolemus, who is also known as Pyrrhus, who later on goes on to finish his father's job of completely destroying the Trojan city and lots of other atrocious things. But coming back to Achilles, and so is hiding in Skyros when Agamemnon starts amassing his company to war, and one of the people they are looking to recruit is Achilles, because they know he is one of the greatest fighter, greatest warrior that ever was, but they don't know where he is. So Odysseus and Diomedes, they find out he's in Skyros, but when they go there they cannot find him, and so Odysseus has this clever trick to get him to reveal himself. And so what he does is they present the king and the people in the court with lots of jewelries and weapons, and so all the women are attracted to jewelry, and so they immediately go to it, except for one maiden who lingers by the weapons, and so Odysseus immediately knows that this is Achilles, and so they convince him to join the war effort. And during the war with the Trojans, Achilles never once chooses to die in battle. He always skirts that point of his fate. He doesn't even give a shit about the war at the point, and he was ready to just go back and live a normal life when Agamemnon steals Briseis from him. And that's where the Iliad starts. It starts with the wrath of Achilles. The first title of the poem starts with the quarrel, and so Achilles gets pissed off and he says he will not fight in the war anymore. At that point he nearly chose to go back home and just live a normal life, because he refuses to serve out under Agamemnon unless he apologizes, and he refuses to fight in this war that he has no personal stake in, because Achilles was not for want or name or glory at that point. He got Briseis as a slave from one of the cities that they had conquered. Achilles has confidence in his own prowess and his own strength, that he knows regardless of what they do, he will achieve what he wants to. But he's not necessarily looking for glory. The thing that forces him to finally set upon his fate is when Patroclus dies. You can read this in two ways. That when Patroclus dies, Achilles sees there is no meaning to home anymore, and so he chooses glory in to go after Hector. Or you can read it that Achilles get blinded by rage at the death of Patroclus, that he chooses glory knowing that it's the only thing that will lead him to kill Hector. And so in all of this, Achilles doesn't ever stand with confidence to say, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to choose. No, he is pushed at the last minute to choose his fate, and it's his wrath and the fates that sort of push him in this manner, because Hector, the Trojan prince, who is the captain of the Trojans, he knows from the very beginning he was going to die in this war. He was going to die from one of the Greeks. And when he thinks he's killed Achilles and it turned out to be Patroclus, he knew his fate was sealed. He knew he was going to die, and that same fate is what propelled Achilles to come after him. The common denominator here is Hector. Hector became the motivation to what Achilles was heading toward. So that in itself sealed his fate for glory. It's not Achilles choosing glory, he chooses Hector, and that choice is what leads him to glory. And so it's a misconception that Achilles chose glory. Okay, back to this. She knew this choice would horrify anyone outside the academy, but no one outside the academy could possibly understand. She would sacrifice her firstborn for a professorial post. She would sever a limb. She would give anything, so long as she still had her mind, so long as she could think. I want to be a magician, she said. It's all I ever wanted. I know, said Peter. Me too, and I need to do this. I must. A torn silence. Alice considered asking, but she knew Peter would not tell her. Peter, when it came to the personal, could be a stone wall. How easily he disappeared behind a placid smile. It's his wish if he wants to share anything personal. I don't know why she's getting peeved about this, because as far as she's concerned, I don't think she's ever shared anything with him, so I don't know why she thinks he would do the same just because he's, in her words, doesn't have to try anything at all. That's subtle then, Peter cleared his throat. So maybe I'll do the Latin and you'll do the Greek and Chinese. He peered at a segment near his right foot. Say, why isn't this in Sanskrit? I'm not comfortable with Sanskrit, Alice said, peeved. This was just like Peter, condescending even when ostensibly just asking for clarification. My goodness, she is so condescending. I've done all the Buddhist sutra references in classical Chinese instead. You know, she could have just written this whole thing as a Chinese mythology inspired thing. It could have just been a Chinese underworld mythic exploration. There's so much out there. She just wants to not put in the effort, just like Alice. That probably works if you're sure. She rolled her eyes. In 3, on go, right on. She counted down, go, and they began their chant. The dreadful, tragic death of Professor Declan Grimes has been utterly foreseeable and avoidable. It was also unknown to most entirely Alice's fault. That day's exercise was nothing more risky nor radical than the thousands of routine experiments Professor Grimes has conducted in that laboratory space for decades. He was only retracing some basic principles of set theory cited in a new article yet coming out with the journal Arcana. It was all utterly routine and no more dangerous than riding a bike, so long as one double-checked their pentagrams. Undergraduate level stuff. Professor Grimes did not double-check his pentagrams. He'd long reached the stage of his career where one left that sort of grunt work to graduate students. Professor Grimm's days were devoted to profound, deep thinking. He saw above the mountains and clouds to discern the truth of things, and then he descended to utter pronouncements like Moses coming down Mount Sinai, and then his underlings hammered out details. He never did arithmetics or translations anymore, and he was far above kneeling over tracing lines of chalk, straining his eyes, straining his back. One might find it feckless, foolish even, to leave one's life in the hands of underpaid, overworked graduate students. But for one thing, Professor Grimm's graduate students were the best in the world. And for another, even graduate students at bottom-rate American institutions could identify the most dangerous mistakes in a pentagram. And this was Cambridge. Okay, this is what I don't get, because in the blurb it is said undergraduate students who goes to hell to save their professor, but it reads like Alice and Peter are already in a graduate program. Am I getting this wrong? I don't know. After so many years of practice, they stood out to any competent scholar like glaring red flags, gaps in the outer circle, misplaced spell words, false equivocations, parentheses left unclosed. Anyone in a sound state of mind could have done it, but Alice was not in a sound state of mind that day. She was, of course, underpaid and overworked. This condition was common among graduate students, and no one cared much about that. But she had also not slept properly in 3 months. She'd drunk so much caffeine that the world shimmered and her chalk trembled in her grip. She felt often that her body had no defined boundaries from the material world, that if she stopped holding herself together as a subject, she would instantly dissolve. She was in no state to work, and she had not been for a very long time. What Alice needed most then was a nice long holiday, and then perhaps institutionalization at some remote facility near the sea. But missing lab was not an option. Professor Grimes had not asked her to assist on a paper for half a year, and though the work was beneath her and though co-authorship was out of the question, Alice was desperate to get back in his good graces. Anyhow, tied to the point of collapse was a default state. The expectation was simply that, through some combination of strong coffee and lembas bread, one pushed through until all deadlines were met and one could collapse into a coma without consequence. Alice had spent much of graduate school feeling exhausted. She was used to it, but she was also angry that afternoon and resentful and confused and such a turbid mess of frustration and fury that the very sound of Professor Grimm's voice made her flinch. His sheer physical proximity, sensing him move kneeling in his shadow, made it hard to breathe. In the brief moments that their eyes met, her lungs stopped working and she thought she might like to die. I mean, it's not said why she was angry that afternoon, just that she was. It was very difficult to concentrate in such an environment, so when she drew the pentagram, she did not close the requisite loops. With pentagrams, it was very important to close the requisite loops. What's with this repetition? Never mind. Uttering incantations invoked the living dead energy of chalk dust, and all that energy had an explosive effect unless contained properly within a defined space. Okay, why chalk is able to invoke the living dead energy? And what is a living dead energy? Is it antimatter? What is a living dead energy? Is it matter in itself? Is it energy? As in potential energy, kinetic energy? Is it some form of energy? How do you know if it's living or dead? How do you even define dead energy? There's no such thing as dead energy. Energy cannot die. This is Physics 101. Oh my god. I am just trying my best here. That's the thing, she's trying to write this in a scientific manner without considering the basic premise of what science is. Physics, chemistry, biology. It's like she's just explaining it in a scientific way without understanding how science actually works. Like, certain laws are made certain laws. Why they say that energy cannot be destroyed? Because energy cannot be destroyed. And what is dead energy? What is dead energy? What is living dead energy? None of this makes sense. Make it make sense. Even the smallest hole could cause disaster, and indeed, smaller holes were worse as they were concentrated all the energy to terrible effect. What does that even mean? Therefore, anyone who drew a pentagram conducted what was known as the end test, tracing a pencil tip from one point of the inscription all the way around to make sure any end following the line would complete the journey. Alice did not do the end test, of course. She did not, in fact, bother to ensure Professor Grimes' body remained intact. It was the kind of mistake that could end careers. It would have if anyone had seen Alice's name on the lab logs or known in any official capacity that she was assisting at all. There would have been an investigation. She would have been questioned before a board, forced to recount in painstaking detail her every last error while they deliberated over whether it was grounds for manslaughter or merely reckless endangerment. She would have lost a stipend, been booted from the program, interrogated by the Royal Academy, and barred from studying or practicing magic at any institution in the world, even the sketchy non-accredited religious ones in states. All this if she did not go to prison. I wonder why that didn't happen. But Professor Grimes did not generally credit his graduate students in experiments, assisting with his research at expense of their own was simply an unspoken requirement of the program. No one knew in any official capacity that anyone was in that room on the day of the accident except for Grimes. No one else saw when howling winds torn from infinite dimensions entered the pentagram. No one saw Professor Grimes' eyeballs stretch horribly out of his face before popping like grapes, his intestines spiraling outwards around his body like a jump rope. His mouth twists in a soundless scream contained within the pentagram. No one saw Professor Grimm's body turn upside down and spin for 7 horrible cycles, intestines rippling before flying apart in all directions, splattering every surface with blood and bone and gut. No one saw his brains on the chalkboard, the toothy jaw fragment landing plop into his afternoon cup of Darjeeling. and no one saw Alice strip naked in the lab, shower, scrub herself clean, throw her clothes in the incinerator, and hurry out the back door dressed in clothes from the overnight bag she always kept at the lab. No one saw her flee in the early hours across campus back to her room in the college, where stripped down for a second shower and alternated vomiting and crying until she was drained enough to fall asleep. This is a very strange paragraph to read. We already know that no one saw what happened to him. I don't know why Alice keeps repeating no one saw that, no one saw this. Yet yes, we get it. No one saw what happened except for you, as you've already stated in the very beginning that his death was your fault. I don't know why she keeps repeating no one saw that. Of course no one saw that. That's why you're still in the program and you're not arrested yet. Also, this paragraph further proves that she was just terrified and traumatized from witnessing such a thing. In no other way is it ever described she felt remorse that he's dead because of her. For all anyone knew, the first anyone heard of Professor Grimm's death was the janitor screaming the next morning. By then, the blood and bits had ruined the pentagram and all the chalk was smudged with gore so that no one could discern precisely what had gone wrong. A piece of Professor Grimm's later identified as his liver had happily landed square on that segment of the algorithm Alice has fudged. They could not conclude it was a terrible accident. They could only conclude it was a terrible accident, one only waiting to befall the most brazenly ambitious thinker of his time, and stop the investigation there. Somehow, University Cleaning Services scooped together enough remains to fill a bucket, which was then transferred to a coffin. The college held a service, the department maintained a state of mourning for a week, all the students and faculty were forced to attend mandatory safety workshops run by colleagues bursting in from Oxford who, with every sneering comment, made it clear that they would never have been so foolish as to let a researcher explode himself all over the lab. Now that's the thing I don't understand. Is magic just inherently known to everyone in this world? And if it's known, why only some people are allowed to study it? I mean, maybe it comes in later parts of the book, maybe it doesn't, and we just have to live with it. Professor Grimm's nameplate was removed from his office door. His graduate seminar was reassigned to a poor junior professor who understood less of the material than the students did. The city papers printed some stuff about what a great loss this was to Cambridge, to the discipline, to the world. And then the summer ended and everyone moved on. Everyone but Alice. She could have kept her mouth shut and gotten on with it. The university would have supported her to the end of her studies. Cambridge's Department of Analytical Magic was very proud of its high graduation rate, and the faculty would have dragged Alice across the finish line one way or another, even if this meant lending her out for several years to their rivals at Oxford. I mean, I don't see what's really wrong with that. I mean, this could have been the best case scenario for anything. And what do you work as after graduating the Department of Analytical Magic? Like, are you just forced to just work in academia after it? Or can you actually get like a real job out there? Like, what is analytical magic even supposed to... What's his field even in? Is it technology? Is it science? Is it biology? Like, what part of the branch of STEM, I guess, is it on? I don't know. But Professor Grimes was the most influential analytical magician in England and probably the world. Half the department chairs in the field were close friends of his, and the other half were so frightened of him they would do anything he said. All of Professor Grimes' previous advisees had gone on to tenured jobs at top-tier program without exception. One recommendation letter from Professor Grimes as good as secured a post anywhere he had advisees applied. Good jobs were vanishingly rare in academia. Alice very much wanted one. She didn't know what to do with herself otherwise. She had trained her entire life to do this one thing, and if she could not do it, then she had no reason to live. I think Alice needs to touch grass. That's what she needs to do. So the next morning, after Professor Grimm's death, once his body was discovered and all the dust had settled, it seemed the most natural thing in the world to begin researching ways to get to hell and back. I still don't see what is even compelling her to even risk half her lifespan. I still don't know how she got to that calculation, but to go on a trip to hell to rescue his soul just for a recommendation letter. Like, she clearly hated the guy. There's in nowhere in that first chapter have we ever gotten a sense that this was someone she was very fond of, or she saw as a sort of father figure, or someone who cared for her or helped her in any way. She's like, this is a guy who took advantage of graduate students. Like, why her brain even jumped to that conclusion of going to hell to bring him back if all she needs were a recommendation letter? Can they not forge a recommendation letter through magic? What are they even studying the magic for? What is the purpose of analytical magic? Just because you say it's analytical magic, we don't know. What is it even used for? We don't know. Does Rebecca know? We have to wait to find out. And it just occurred to me that she said that going to hell in itself was incredibly frowned upon by people in academia, and she's willing to go to hell to rescue Professor Grimm's soul. But does she even understand the consequence of doing such a thing? Let's say she did succeed in bringing him back, and he writes a job recommendation letter. Won't any other people in that world be confused as how is this man even alive after they've witnessed his funeral of not even a body, it's just a bucket that was just filled with his innards and stuff, and he clearly knows that she is the one who caused his death. Like, has she not thought the implication through of before doing this? Like, if she goes and brings him back, clearly he's gonna say that she's the one who's caused his death, and she's gonna get in trouble or maybe even arrested. It's gonna be clearly frowned upon that this is a person who they clearly known to be dead, and suddenly he's alive and he's writing job recommendation letters. Like, where is the correlation in that? And if she did manage to bring him back, how is she certain that he's not going to reveal the truth that it's her fault that he died in the first place? And regardless if she's getting the job recommendation or not, she's clearly getting arrested. Can you see my problem with this book? Nothing makes sense scientifically, logically, or otherwise stated. Peter had a very nice spellbinding voice. It was something Alice had always resented about him, how his voice made her seem reedy in comparison. My goodness, this woman is as petty as they come. She found it particularly disgruntling given how encourageous it was given his thick, thin frame. Rude. It seemed unfair such a rich sound could come from that spindly goose throat. My goodness, this person is such a dick. I said that she's such a dick. Every now and then, a research paper surfaced on why male voices were better suited for magic, citing reasons of pitch, depth, or steadiness, and they always sparked a big hubbub involving statements from women in magic, societies, and apologetic statements from journal editorial boards. Alas, no one had managed to conclusively prove them false. Unfortunately, Alice suspected the paper were right, and at this moment she's grateful. Peter's confident rhythm made her confident in turn, and she found herself lulled along by a smooth, reassuring rumble. The target defined as Professor Declan Grimes, they said in unison. The destination defined as hell or afterlife or the eight courts or the domain of Lord Yama the Merciful. They finished. Nothing happened. A second passed, then several. Okay, again, how are they absolutely certain that he's even in hell? There is no correlation or even indication to the pentagram that she drew is the same pentagram she had drawn for Professor Grimes. She doesn't even describe the inscription that she's done there. This was specifically to go to hell. But that's the thing, how is she certain that the guy is in hell? How did she even jump to the conclusion? Because the pentagrams are two different pentagrams. So is it specific that those who study magic, when they die, they go to hell? How are they certain he is in hell? What gave it away that they know he's in hell? Because if this is a world with borders and different realms, he could have been anywhere. Okay, you know what could have fixed it? If this was a magic, this was a specific magic he was testing out, and maybe interdimensional teleportation or realm travel or something to indicate where he was going or where he's trying to get to, and something like that happened and they're like, we fucked this up and he's probably trapped here, then yes, we get an understanding that okay, we know where he is basically. But there is no indication in any of the other paragraph that it's certain that he's in hell. How? I want to know. Okay, if Rebecca is telling us that, oh, this is a realm with lots of other realm and borders of the world, is hell the only realm that exists? Because if she's talking about the Greek underworld, the Hindu Yamaloka, Christian hell, this common denominator is that they also talk about paradise, they also talk about heaven or the Isle of the Blessed. You know, how is she certain that he's not there? He's not just chilling in the Isle of the Blessed. Like, how are you not certain that he's in hell in the first place? You know, what is the prerequisite to being in hell as opposed to heaven? But we're not even given any sort of terms on how a person ends up in any of these realms. I don't know. I mean, does Rebecca even have an answer to this? Are we even gonna get an answer to the rest of my questions in this book? Can you see why I have such a problem with this book? It's only the title, the blurb, and the bonus chapter of 15-20 pages, and I already have so many problems with it. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, this is the last page. And then the room seemed at once to freeze, a creeping chill from nowhere that cut straight into their bones. Alice shuddered. "And?" Peter offered his palm. She slapped it away. "Shush." "Sorry." Peter's hand hung in the air for a moment before he pulled it back, and Alice realized belatedly he might have been asking her to hold his. It was too late. White light flared from the chalk lines, forming a silo around them. The laboratory disappeared from sight. A great rumbling noise filled the air. Alice reached for Peter's arm only for balance, mine, but the ground lurched violently and she toppled over onto her bum. For a moment she could see nothing, hear nothing over the roaring column. Felt a great hooking sensation in her chest. Not painful, only sharp, like some ghostly hand had reached in and yanked her heart out from in between her ribs. The pressure was overwhelming. She could not breathe. She curled in on herself, hoping desperately she hadn't fallen out of the pentagram. The light faded, the shaking stopped. Alice turned her hands over before her eyes, blinking. She felt fine. Her skin was coated with a thin layer of ash, but it brushed away easily. She patted her chest. Her heart was in place. Her limbs were intact. Her entrails were neatly inside her. If the price was paid, she could feel its loss. Peter stood up, coughing. He brushed an ash-covered clump of hair out of his eyes. "So, this is all." Alice peered about. All around them were grey fields, endless plains under a dark sky. A sun. Their sun? A shadow? A twin? Hung low and ponderous, its lights maddeningly dim. She breathed in deep. She brought a cloth mask in case the air reeked. I don't know how they're certain that anything from the realm of Earth works in hell. Like, aren't they two metaphysical realms? Like, how are they certain the properties are even the same? See, when someone tries to explain stuff in a sciencey way, and I'm looking at it in a sciencey way, and I'm asking questions in a sciencey way, and I cannot find the answers, it's very frustrating. In Virgis Aeneid, the Greeks name hell Ornos, the place that is birdless, for none could fly over its foul breath. But the air smelled of nothing, and the temperature just this side of chilly. She'd expected more tortured, screaming sulfur and brimstone, but it turned out that perhaps American theologists had been exaggerating meteorologically. Hell didn't seem much worse than an English spring. She slung her backpack over her shoulder. A faint dark mass loomed in the distance, and there she assumed lay the fields of asphodel. "You all right?" Peter was never better. Alice stepped out the pentagram and trudged forward. "Let's go." Okay, how is she certain that's the field of asphodel? And we're back into the Greek underworld. Okay, can you see my problem with this book already? It feels as if she's putting in all these names, all of these characters that are connected to death and hell in this way, just to sound cool. Just to sound fancy. If she just keeping it with the Greek underworld, it could have just been the underworld. It doesn't necessarily need to be hell. We can still keep the name of KATABASIS, and we can still say, magic is a learned subject, because we have Hecate, we have Kirky, we have Medea, who are also learned in this subject, and so this is past knowledge within us, although not a lot of people pursue it. There are certain weird people like Alice Law that are determined to study it. I don't understand why Rebecca is clumping all of them together, and the fact that you're using Latin, Sanskrit, classical Chinese in the pentagram makes no sense at all, because a specific language is related to specific rituals. There's a reason why you are taught that thing in that specific language and ritual, and what the specific word means. You can't just clump Sanskrit, classical Chinese and Latin all in one pentagram of a circle and think that's going to get you somewhere. It could be in bloody English for all anyone cared, because at this point, I don't think it matters anymore what the rules of this world entail to, because Rebecca doesn't seem to be telling us what the rules are. Just that this is magic in this almost scientific way. We don't know what it does, just that it does. Why do they use chalks? We don't know. We're just supposed to suspend our disbelief for this story, regardless of how she tries to convey it, because she's trying to make magic sound as if it is this scientific subject that you can study, but she does not explain the properties of what makes up that branch of magic, analytical magic. We don't know what it does, just that these people are studying it, and apparently people can go to hell when something goes wrong with the pentagram. Do we know why? Why is it specifically hell? We aren't told. Which feels very condescending and basically makes you look not very smart, I would say. The final part, someone took a video of Rebecca summer last year in the Manchester Literature Festival, and she was there to talk about a yellow face. And so I think one of the last parts of the interview, she talks a bit about KATABASIS. And so in her words, quote, "KATABASIS is the return to the fantasy genre, but nonsensical fantasy," end quote. Okay, the thing she's referring to here is nonsensical fantasy, is that she was teaching a craft class about Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Okay, so in her words, quote, she was really enamored by Lewis Carroll's ability to create a world in which where the ground is always shifting under your feet and the rules don't make any sense. And the world is composing itself and buffering with each step you take. End quote. Okay, anyone who's read Alice in Wonderland will know that Lewis Carroll, aka Louis Dodgson, is a mathematician. He loved maths and he wrote Alice in Wonderland, or the world of Wonderland to be specific, as a sort of mathematical equation. That is the reason why the illogical makes logical sense, because the illogical is rooted in a way that we can comprehend or understand logic. That's why to us it's not just complete nonsensical, it makes complete sense. And in some ways it's also crafted as a chessboard. It's not apparent in Alice in Wonderland, but through the looking glass the whole book is played as a chess match. You've literally got the red queen and the white queen. You have all the pawns and the characters and Alice going from one end to the other, and it's played as a chess game. And that's the thing, Lewis uses logic to ground you within the world of illogical. Rebecca says she's influenced by it, but it just feels that Rebecca's world is just a complete illogical with no sense of logic in any way, because the logic doesn't work, because she's trying to stuff in too many things into one pot that doesn't work. There's another quote that she says, the world feels grounded because the main character is grounded, because the main character is stable through the line. My main character is an absolute unstable, depressed mess, end quote. You've just given yourself away because how are you going to write an illogical world with your characters not being stable or our line of stability through that story? You've just contradicted yourself with this statement, Rebecca. That's what I've been trying to explain and trying to say, that she has been crafting this world in a sort of a Lewis Carroll's Wonderland, but she refuses to actually work on it, but simply naming it hell because of all the puns and jokes that you can make with it. I don't know which is it that she wants it to be, and apparently she can't choose either, so she puts all three in it. She is not grounding her characters, she's not grounding her world in this logical way. I would prefer that she had even crafted her own version of hell, or said that, you know, every culture has only a glimpse of what hell is. We have the actual picture of what hell is, and then maybe put in a little reference there and here, and so that already established that these cultures, they've only gotten a glimpse of it, so everyone has just a piece of the puzzle to the big picture, and so that could be what this is. But she's like, no, every culture, every world's hell is real, and here we are. That makes no sense. That's the thing, she's clearly trying to make this into this fantastical puzzle-like nonsensical world inspired by Lewis Carroll, but she insists on it being hell. But why? There's literally no logic in it. Regardless of your world being illogical in the first place, the whole story feels illogical at this point. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is the first chapter. Maybe we'll get explanation for the rest of the story. Maybe we'll get some answer to the questions I've asked. I only hope so. I mean, I want to get these answers, and if she doesn't, I'll admit that I'm wrong. I would say, you know, she's proved me wrong. I have no moral objection to being superior to anyone. She's an established author. She's New York Times bestselling author. I'm just a person who reads. So I have no stakes in this except to make her prove her words. The things I'm asking are ridiculous, and yes, she has all these answers and she can give them to me, and I'm more than happy to have them, because if she can give me these answers, it will mean that I get the satisfaction of knowing that this is a great story, that I can basically sleep at night knowing I won't have questions pondering my mind is, why are they using chalk to get to hell? But I'm not that bothered by it, I suppose, but I still want this to be a good book, because, you know, it sounds like a great concept, it sounds like a great story, but the execution just seems very lackluster. And maybe it's just the first chapter, so I'll wait to see what she has to say for the rest of the book in August. I'll release a new video when the new book comes out, but for now, it's just this. And on one last note, and this may be my own personal opinion, does anyone else feel like Rebecca kept trying to do one up on Susanna Clarke? Because I cannot remember which retailer it was that described this book as Piranesi and Dante inspired world, and something clicked in my mind on it, because she said when she wrote Babel, it was clearly inspired by Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell, the novel of Susanna Clarke's, which she very arrogantly called as a tonal response to, which, I mean, it felt as if she's insinuating that there was something wrong with the novel, and Babel is trying to rectify that. Did it in any way rectify Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell, the novel? I read Babel and I threw an idea after it because it was really boring and it does not make sense. And the thing that really pissed me off was this statement. I'm not sure if she was the one who said Babel was a thematic response to The Secret History and a tonal response to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and that clearly rubbed me the wrong way, because your books aren't even out in the market yet. People have not even bought to make personal opinions of it, and why would you say such a thing? You know, it felt so arrogant. If you said, oh no, book is clearly inspired by Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell because I really loved, the little footnotes the author had put in, because that's clearly what she said in the interview too, and or maybe because I read The Secret History and a lot of the themes had been playing in my mind and certain things popped up that I found that nobody had talked about, and so that partly inspired writing Babel. Like, you can clearly give credit to these authors who have done the work for decades to put out these really beloved pieces of book, rather than saying, oh, my book is a greater book than all of these other books. I read The Secret History more than 5 times. I barely can go through your book once and I DNF'd it. So which side of the end are we on here anyways? And then Susanna Clarke released Piranesi, and from the reviews I've watched, everyone clearly loved it. And suddenly Rebecca's new book is seemingly also inspired by the same stuff, because Piranesi is a story about a man trapped in a house. A strange thing happens and no logic applies. KATABASIS is a hell where 2 characters are trapped, where a strange thing happens and no logic applies. I don't know, just a thought. I mean, I'm not saying there's any merit to this, it's just my own personal opinion, and it's just something I've noticed. Also, I'll be eagerly awaiting KATABASIS to see what else awaits us in that book. This review is already so long, and it's only been the title, the blurb, and the first bonus chapter, and I've already gotten so much to talk about it. I don't know how I'm going to even get through the whole book when it comes out, but if it answers 70% of the questions I have here, then it'll be a shorter video, it'll be a shorter review. So if you've made it this far, thank you for listening, and see you in the next whatever is it I want to talk about.